Meet my SalesBot. She's so hot. She analyzes data like a real big shot. She's got 5 shocking lessons that everyone should do to double your sales by 2022. 2022.
Yay! All right, so again, welcome. And I'm going to keep this up because we're going to start out with a test. Oh, let these people in. Can you see the waiting room to let them in there? My assistant Brooke is here. Say hi, Brookie.
Hi.
And she's going to be letting people in. All right, so that's your job. All right, first we're going to start off with a test. It's called the F test. If you've taken this test before, you can't take it again, okay? But here's what I want you to do. The rules are very simple. I'm going to share my screen with you. And there's going to be a sentence on the screen, okay? The sentence has letters in it. And one of those letters is F. I want you to count the number of F's in the sentence. And then I want you to count again and make sure you have the number correct. And then I want you to put your number in the chat. Okay? Everyone get it? Very simple. This is not a trick question. If you've done it before, again, I know you know the answer, so I want you to stay out of it. But I'm going to share the screen with you. Again, it's just the sentence on the piece of white screen. Ignore anything else on the screen, like the tabs and things like that, okay? All right, you ready? All right, I'm going to share it in 3, 2, 1. Okay, you got it? Give everyone a couple more seconds. All right, put it in the chat there. And I'm going to take it away. Oh, if I can find the share button. All right, let's see. What's in the chat? What do you got? I see, let me scroll up here. Okay, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 6, 3, 5, 6, 6. Do you see that? Let's see, I wish I could calculate it. All right, come on, not everybody answered. If you're on your phone, I know it's hard to find the chat. Okay, what's going on? How do we have so many different answers? All right, who thinks they're right? Give me like a wave in the reactions. Julie thinks she's right. Okay, who's willing to bet on it? Come on. I'm in a waging kind of mood. All right, so you all saw the same sentence. Lydia, I like you. All right. Quite confident. Okay, Tom. Okay, so what I have a Powerball ticket, yes. Oh, okay. Did they already call the numbers on it, or is this one the one coming up? Because I heard the Powerball and no winners. All right, so how does everybody have different answers? You guys are willing to bet on it, right? This doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to show you the sentence again because I know you're going to beg for me to show you the sentence again. But I want you to see this because I've done this with groups of 100. I've done this with groups of 5, and I'll always get a variety of answers. So here's the lesson. However many letter F's you counted, you are exactly right. Whatever you said is correct. Why is that true? Because whatever you perceive is your reality, and it's true for you. And that's all that matters. Okay? And whatever your customers see is their reality, and it's true for them. So if you saw 4 F's and your customer thinks there's 6 F's, are you going to get the sale? No, not unless you can convince them there's 4, or you can step into their shoes and see how they saw 6. Okay? I also wanted to do this lesson with you today because it's a lesson that not everything you see in the world is true, or at least true to you. And the lessons we're going to show you today are they're not popular, okay? Because what Shruti is going to show you, these are things that only 4 to 10% of salespeople are doing, according to the data she analyzed. That means that if you go out and ask people how they make sales, you ask your peers, you go into groups or whatever, 90% of the time, people are going to tell you something that doesn't work. Okay? It might get average results. It might get below average results. But the top 5-10% of salespeople are doing things differently than the other 90%. So most times if you ask people what they do, they're going to give you information that they think is correct, but it's not actually going to help you. Okay? So keep an open mind. There's always something to learn. If you're a trainer or a coach, there's always some new way to learn how to communicate this with your salespeople. All right, I'm going to share the screen one more time so we can count exactly how many F's there are, and I might be able to show you a new reality. Here we go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who said 6? Now, all the people say 6 think, oh, I'm so smart, right? This has nothing to do with intelligence, okay? In fact, the reason why you probably, if you didn't get 6, you probably missed one of the ofs, OF, right? And that's because when you hear the word of in your head, it sounds like a V. So your mind actually completely eliminates it like it was never there. It disappears, okay? These are the tricks our minds can play on us if we're not careful, okay? And the same is true for your customers. When they see things a certain way, that's where they are, and you need to meet them there. Same thing for your salespeople. When they see something a certain way, that's where they are. You need to sit in their shoes and empathize with them in order to help them change and make that transition. Whether you're helping someone transition from not being a customer to being a customer, right? Or being a poor salesperson to an extraordinary salesperson. Okay, now I'm gonna send the reins over to Shruti, and she's gonna take over and she's gonna share what we learned. All right, Shruti, you're on.
Awesome, thank you.
All right.
One sec.
Says you started, but we don't see anything yet.
Let me try that again. One sec.
Okay. I have them too if you need them. But in the meantime, While we're waiting, why don't you just drop like what you're hoping to get out of this training so we can make sure we cover it. We're going to do a Q&A at the end, but you're welcome to ask your questions throughout, because since this is live, you get the opportunity to get your questions answered live. So you're welcome to drop those in. We still have people joining us here. And while you're getting those up, Shruti, I'll just go through the agenda. So first we're going to go through the data that Shruti came up with. And then we're going to go through some best practices. And then if you stay to the end, we're going to give all of this to you in notes, so you don't have to worry about taking any notes. But I'm also going to be offering everyone on the call a free call with me to get their custom sales blueprint for 2021 to convert leads to sales, and a trial with Wingman, so you can try this with your own sales team. All right, I think she's ready.
Awesome. Let's get started. I think a lot of you might know Jessica, some of you might know me, but yeah, just quick introduction. Jessica already mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Wingman. My journey, has been quite maybe unusual, but maybe in the sales world, it's usual for people to have come into sales from various backgrounds. I spent a decade in finance before switching over to sales. I've done various things in technology, life sciences, investment banking, etc. But this has by far been the most exciting thing I've done. And you'll find out why. It's just amazing to see, some of the exciting data that we come across day in and day out. When I'm not working, I enjoy podcasts and board games. Not as musical as Jessica for sure. Jessica, would you like to do your introduction?
Sure. I'm Jess. I'm CEO of JPM Sales Partners and founder of Sales Musicology. I help purpose-driven founders get their mission to the world by embracing their inner sales rebel. I specialize in SaaS, tech, consulting, coaching, and have helped my clients generate over $120 million in revenue. I'm also an award-winning jazz artist, and I believe sales is music. And in order to really master sales, you need to unleash your inner rebel artist to make all your wild sales fantasies come true. And that's what I help people do in my coaching programs.
Awesome. I think, like Jessica mentioned, we will be going through data for, what happens when people ask qualification questions, how often do they ask them, and also some of the so-called best practices in sales. Some of them hold weight, some of them don't, and we'll find out which ones.
All right.
Before we dive into the data, where does this data come from? What does it look like? Wingman is a conversational intelligence tool that analyzes sales calls. And so all of this data is proprietary to Wingman. We looked at 2 million minutes of sales calls. I didn't wake up one morning and say, let me dive into this data. What happened once COVID hit was a lot of sales managers, started asking questions like, how much has the world changed? We all knew that it has changed, but it was hard to quantify, is everything falling off the cliff? Is everybody really asking questions around budget? Will I close any deals this quarter, right? So we started helping our clients answer some of those questions through their own data. And as we went through that exercise, what we realized was that some of those trends held very well across the board, and we thought it would be useful, even for the larger sales community to just understand some of those things. What I'm going to show you today is not specific to COVID. We did also do some analysis that was very specific to COVID and the changes we saw there. If you're interested in that, you can always drop by our website. You'll get to see that. Today we'll just be covering some broader trends.
All right.
So I know qualification questions, doing discovery, always touchy topics. In fact, I was listening to a podcast today which said, demo before discovery. is okay. Those type of things maybe used to be true when customers had lesser information. So yeah, I know this is somewhat of a raging debate. A lot of reps don't like to do qualification, or they at least don't like to do it in as much detail as their managers would like. So let's see how many people actually do this. Right, so qualification questions happen in 10% of all the calls that we saw. It is. Go ahead, Jessica. Surprisingly low.
This is why I have you on, because I'm so shocked. Yeah, I mean, okay. Go ahead.
And the thing is that while there is a debate on does it really help, the data seems to suggest that it does. It does seem to increase the win rates by a whopping 53%. Right, so that's a pretty significant change in win rates. But we do see that reps, still are hesitant around those questions. Some of those things have improved with COVID and with people trying to maybe improve their win rates by optimizing, knowing which deals to focus on. And especially when it comes to qualification questions, I think one thing that the data doesn't show is if you're able to qualify better and prioritize your deals better, the impact on your win rates is actually higher than what you see here, right? Because this is only showing you changes in win rates for deals where those questions were asked, right? So I think overall, as a sales rep, it seems to be really important to go and ask qualification questions. Jessica, what is the advice that you usually give your customers, and what is the pushback that you get here?
Well, in technology, there is a an opinion that just demo to as many people as you can, and that is your qualification. They will self-qualify. They watch the demo and decide for themselves if it's good for them. So anybody who's watched the reason why people really buy and the emotional factors that go into buying knows that you get one chance to do a demo to get to that next step. And so you want to make sure that it's the right time, not just the right time to do the demo, but that you're doing it with the right people at the price, people who can afford it and need it and want to do something. So for me, that's the reason why we qualify people. It's not saying like, oh, you're not good enough to work with me, you're not qualified. It's not that kind of qualification. It's making sure that they're in a position to buy before you actually present them anything.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, another phrase that I heard in this was you should educate your customers and you should learn from your prospects. So, ask them as many questions, because the more you can learn from them, the better your chances of converting them. So, of course, one of the things that you would expect reps to ask is just helping understand the problem that the customer has, trying to extract that out, and making sure that that problem matches what solution they provide. And this number to me was beyond shocking, right? At like 3.5% of calls having this kind of problem-based selling, right? Like saying, basically asking your prospect something like, what is the main challenge? What is your priority? What are you looking to solve? So this is definitely low. Any guesses on how this impacts win rates?
Well, I mean, if it's like going to a doctor, if they don't know what the problem is, how could they possibly give you the right solution, right? So I would imagine this is going to be a big one. And only 3% of salespeople are asking what the problem is. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This probably single-handedly among all of the qualifying type of things has the biggest impact. Right. And I think this is relatively unsurprising, right? You would expect that people need to know the problem, and then you're hopefully able to build a much better pitch.
Yeah. So why do you think people don't
Right.
ask? I mean, it seems like an obvious thing. I think one of them is like if you're calling down a list of people that have your company decided was target market for you, or they booked a call with you, you're assuming they have the problem, so you don't need to talk about it. Do you think that's one of the reasons why people skip that part?
Yeah, I think sometimes they assume, what you mentioned in terms of the customer qualifies themselves, right? I think the other part of it is maybe sometimes they don't want to hear the answer because not a lot of sales reps are comfortable, taking a problem and necessarily either tying it back to the solution or going back and saying, sorry, our solution doesn't solve that problem.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. So a lot of people kind of live in that hopeful world where they say, if I really dazzle somebody with the solution, they'll, maybe just forget about their problem or think about a different problem that I can convince them that they have.
Yeah, right. So just avoiding the questions and kind of getting through the demo as fast as you can. Part of these, and this probably applies to a lot of the ones going forward too, can also be how they're compensated or how they're measured. So if you're being measured by, the number of demos you do in a week, then you might, quickly, skip through these qualification questions because you just want to get the number for the demos or the presentations, that could be part of it too, like from a management perspective of what are you measuring and rewarding them on.
Yeah, absolutely. That disconnect does exist. So yeah, I think this is obvious. The good news is that we did see a significant increase in this number over the last year. And I think that's probably because reps wanted to be, more diligent with the pandemic.
Oh, Shruti, we have a request for you to increase your volume if that's possible.
Okay, sure. I hope this is better.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And the other qualification question, and I'm just going through kind of the BANT framework, like the very basic qualification framework, is, timeline related questions. Now, again, this is a little bit better, right? I think also because timeline related questions tend to be easier to ask as compared to sometimes authority or budget type of questions. Right, so more reps seem to be comfortable asking this. And it does also have a significant impact on win rates. So just as an aside, one of the things that we saw during COVID was that it wasn't as much the budget objections that increased, it was actually a lot of objections that increased during COVID were related to timeline.
Okay.
And it's really important to understand the timeline, because that is what helps reps and managers decide, what the closing cycle is going to look like. Is something like this going to be, like, do I need to have a follow-up cadence? Do I need to have a nurture cadence? Those type of strategic things. So yeah, I think this is an important piece that has, some bigger picture impact as well.
Yeah. When do you want to solve your problem? Is this something you need to do this month, or is this you're looking out into 6 months or a year from now? It would change how you approach the timeline.
Exactly. Yeah, clearly, people aren't comfortable with authority, right? And so this is surprisingly low, of course. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on why, and also maybe how you could get reps to ask authority questions, because they do tend to be uncomfortable?
Yeah. So I can give you the surface answer and then I could give you the real answer. Which one do you want first? I'll start with the surface level answer is, sometimes they just assume that, whoever they're talking to is a decision maker, and then they'll just get them in touch with the decision maker, or they'll become the champion to whomever the decision makers are. Or crossing fingers, hoping that, if you present to somebody, they'll be so inclined and they'll do such a great job of presenting to their manager that you won't that you won't need to be involved. But of course, they're not salespeople, right? So they typically, aren't great at what you've sold them. That's the surface level answer. The deeper answer is, a lot of the salespeople I work with, we work on like imposter syndrome, and what that means is basically like being intimidated by the decision makers, because maybe you see them as being a different status or in more different like intelligence level or income or whatever, and you're intimidated by them. Think of like a rep right out of college. How could I talk to CEO of $1 billion company? What can I possibly offer? So of actually avoiding those conversations and trying to go more towards people you consider peers, I think is another reason why people don't dig into actually talking to the decision makers.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point. And I've actually heard the same thing about the challenge of adopting some of the sales methodologies. Like, while challenger sales, makes a lot of sense on paper, your 20-something-year-old rep just out of college isn't going to be comfortable challenging the prospect on some of those things. And so you're right that sometimes you do go a level down just because maybe that's more comfortable from a rapport building standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, what I like to do is really dig into that imposter syndrome, right? And have them realize that they do have something of value to offer. The challenger sale, I agree with the idea. You have to be able to challenge people in order to get them to move forward and out of their problem into a solution. But that doesn't mean like there has to be conflict. It doesn't mean that there needs to be a relationship in order to challenge them. So trying to teach people that we're all human beings at the core and you're there as the expert of your product. So go right to the decision makers who need your help. Don't try to skip around and dance around. Go right to the people who make the decision. That's what the best salespeople are doing. So if you're not, you're kind of wasting your time in a way, and leaving a lot up to chance.
Makes sense. Surprisingly, the change in win rates for this wasn't as significant, but I think part of the reason, and I think if we slice and dice this data further, we might see some interesting trends. If you have smaller sales cycle, shorter sales cycles, smaller annual contract values, sometimes this question might not be as important because the person you're speaking to who's reached out might very often just be the default authority person. But I think especially when it comes to larger, more enterprise style deals, this question might be much, much more significant.
Nice. Hey, if you guys have any comments or questions, just drop them in the chat. We'll bring them in so we can answer them as we go along.
Awesome. I'll keep this a little bit short. Of course, we all know budget is important. It also tends to be one that people are not very comfortable asking. And what we see is it is definitely an important one for the win rates. Right.
So here's what I want to challenge the people in the chat to do. Drop in your best, like, how do you ask people about budget? How do you ask the budget question? Drop that in the chat. But a 79% increase. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, the other interesting thing with budget is it also, like in cases where the budget question gets asked, it also increases the loss rates. What it really means is that you're much more likely to come to a decision if you address this versus having like so many of your deals just in limbo. And that's really important for a salesperson because then you know what to focus on.
Yeah. I think the counter argument to that is, I think it gets confused with you have to build value before you show them the price, which means that they're waiting all the way to the end of the demo to reveal the pricing. And I think that's what the conflict might be, is like far as what are the other 90% doing, as like we talked about in the beginning, what are most people doing? They're thinking, well, we shouldn't talk about money till the end, build up the value and then tell them what they need to pay for it. Okay, so Epiphany says she asks questions like what are their metrics and what's their monthly budget and things like that. Cool.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the other way to therefore seed this is to seed the demo with questions and conversation points that also tie back to the ROI of the product, right? Because then as you go through that process, it becomes easier for you to come in and say, listen, okay, so this is how much you're spending on this problem today. And then, if I show you something that, does this in 10% of what you're spending today, is that valuable to you? And there, the budget question, often the answer for the budget question doesn't, come as a line item in a spreadsheet somewhere already. Very often that line item needs to get created, and the value of the sales call is to help create the budget. Right.
And you don't need to do the demo to create the value. That's kind of where these conversations come in, right? Is diagnosing their problems, digging in, figuring out what is their problem and what is it worth to them to solve it before you even offer solutions. Yeah, cool. I love the questions that are in the chat. These are all great ways to approach it. Also think about not only what is your budget, but do you is this something you need to get approved? Like who's in charge of the budget? When are you examining the budget? Things like that. What is the process for getting this approved? If you decide it's a good decision, all those things are around budget, which ties into authority too, because then you get some new information about who's really some of the other decision makers they might not have brought up yet. What's the range you want to stay within? Yeah, range, like price ranging, right? Price ranges. Very cool.
Jessica, we are going to jump into so-called sales best practices. Do you have a favorite one?
My best practice?
Yeah.
Have fun. Have fun with it. Have fun. People first, develop relationships. Nothing matters unless you have a great relationship. So all things considered, if it's the same product, solution, price, all of that, even if you're more expensive, people will go with the person they feel they can trust and have a better relationship with. So that's gonna be my best practice, but I don't know how you measure that on your SalesBot.
I'm not going to challenge that one. We'll look at some of the others instead. So yeah, I think, and the reason why I chose agenda setting is a lot of times, basically there are sales reps who believe I know what works. I've done it this way for the last X number of years. And so I think this is how I should do this. This works for me, right? And it's very hard for managers or coaches to come in and change some of those behaviors, which is where, I think data plays a really interesting role, because it's no longer about, what you believe versus I believe. It's about just seeing what seems to work in the field.
Yeah.
So yeah, agenda setting is just one of those things.
I just had a thought, right? Because I wanted to, I'll interrupt because, so like my audience, and I'm looking in the chat of people who follow me, they're all like, most of them are high level sales and sales managers and even coaches. And very few beginners, although I would love to have more beginners, but it seems like we attract like a really intelligent here. And so I think a lot of this is like, yeah, we know that already. But I think what's cool to draw from it is like this might be an insight into what your salespeople aren't doing, that maybe like they're telling you they do it, or they're nodding, yeah, I did that, yeah, I did that. But if your salespeople are indicative of this like very large pool of data, then chances are they might not be asking these questions, right? And you might want to listen in a little more closely.
Exactly.
So agenda, when you say agenda setting is, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So what we were tracking here was literally somebody's, bringing up sometime in the beginning of a call saying, listen, these are the few things we are going to cover today, or, this is the agenda that I want to lay out for the call. Is there something else you want to add to it, right? Very similar to what you did, for example, at the start of the webinar. It does seem commonsensical to do this, at the start of every call. It doesn't matter whether that's a discovery call or a demo call. Even if it's like, your fifth follow-up call with a customer, it's probably still worthwhile laying out, like, what is it that we want to achieve by the end of this?
Yeah.
And I think it's important because, if you frame it to say that, listen, if everything goes well in this call, then we should be able to, take whatever is the next step. And you're forcing them to think, what is the information they need to extract from you during that conversation to be able to take that next step, right? If there isn't a clear next step that you define as part of, your agenda setting piece, very often people are happy to hand over the reins to you because it means they need to do less work during the call and say, you know what, just say whatever you want. I will listen, and then we'll, say a polite goodbye.
So, and I'll add my tip for the day. When you set the agenda, I call it a pre-close. And so it's more than just telling them like what you're going to do today, because this gets confused with like actually just telling them the agenda, but the expectations at the end, right? Which you did say, Shruti, you said like, what are the expectations for the meeting, which is what is my expected outcome? So is the expected outcome, like if everything looks good, we're going to book a demo, or we're going to book a call to dig in deeper to what we have to offer? Or is the next step, the next step is, if everything looks good to you, we're going to have another meeting. We're going to set up another meeting with so-and-so, or we're going to take your payment for the first month, or whatever it is. Like being very specific about what the close is for the end of that meeting, and getting their agreement to it. You're like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Absolutely.
We have a certain idea of what's supposed to happen, but they don't. So a lot of times they're just nodding. And if they don't know that they're expected to make some kind of decision at the end, then they don't even ask the questions that they need to get the answers to in order to make that decision. They're kind of just there for the show. Show me.
Get your pack of popcorn and just sit back and watch the demo.
Like this, right? Like in high school,
yeah.
The teacher put on the video tapes and everyone took a nap.
So yeah, I think before I jump to the next slide here, health warning, please make sure you're seated. The number is pretty shocking.
Whoa.
It more than doubles the win rate.
That's why my mentor, who's on the line today, Vinny, he said that is always the thing that people don't do. So like if a rep comes and goes, I don't understand why I didn't get the sale, or the check's in the mail, or they're going to think about it. It's like, you didn't pre-close. You didn't set the agenda. It's like almost guaranteed that's a big reason why deals don't happen. That's awesome. 120% increase.
Yeah, I think like, yeah, if there is just one thing that maybe you want to go back and implement, I would say let this be the one, because it's also so black and white, and it's also so easy to implement. Like, it doesn't have all of those other psychological challenges that we spoke about when it comes to maybe asking for authority or budget or those type of things.
Yeah. What happens is when you ask people to make a decision, then they actually start giving you objections before you've even done like a presentation. So, which is good, right? Because if they go, oh, I can't make a decision because I have to have so-and-so here. Well, now we have more, we have better qualification. Oh, we have to get someone else in the room. Thank you. So it actually gives you some of that information that you might have missed because they weren't like being asked to actually commit to. Not saying yes, but making a decision.
Yeah. And I'll quickly answer a couple of questions that people had on the agenda setting piece. One was, yes, this is the win rate for a closed deal. So wherever you see the difference, you're looking at the difference, so basically the win rate on average across all the calls as compared to the win rate for calls where that particular behavior happens. So this is the final closed win rates that we are looking at.
Okay.
And I guess the other question was, what is the key agenda setting statement? So some of the statements that we were tracking was, of course, just somebody mentioning agenda in the start of the call, or someone talking about, this is what we will cover, or, during today's call, etc. So those kind of statements in the beginning to lay out the path. We didn't even necessarily, go all the way to pre-close statements, but a lot of times those go hand in hand.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think the other one that we all like to talk about is open-ended questions, what we've mentioned here as engaging questions. This, is great. Looks like they do happen frequently enough, right? And the thing is that they don't seem to have much of an impact. Right now, it seems somewhat counterintuitive. I think it's the question really is not, sometimes you don't necessarily need to ask an open-ended question to get all of the information that you want, right? I think if you have enough practice, if you understand the customer, persona really well, maybe, you could get away with things which are, more yes, no type of questions. But this honestly confounded me a little bit. Jessica, any thoughts?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so this is like, what's the difference between asking engaging questions versus open-ended questions versus like yes, no questions? Is that what it was tracking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It is a little surprising, but I think it's better than no questions, right? Because if you're just doing all the talking and not asking questions, I think that could even be worse. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. And the other thing is that sometimes, and so the way we defined engaging questions was if a salesperson asked a question that got the customer to speak for 30 seconds or more. So that's kind of the definition here.
That's a long time on a call.
Yeah. So yeah. That is one, that is a long time. And secondly, sometimes people tend to, also have more interactive conversations, right? So you might ask me a question, I might reply to that with a question, and then I might continue later on, right? So some of those things don't get captured in the data. So. So yeah, I think customer stories are definitely one piece that is great for building trust. Like one of the things that you mentioned about best practices was how do you kind of build trust with the customer so that they want to work with you, right? And I think customer stories is a good way to do that. Clearly doesn't happen as often.
1.3. So does that include like case studies and testimonials or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, basically salespeople saying things like, we already work with, a list of companies, or we work with XYZ customers, those kind of things, like talking about some of those success stories. And I think one of the reasons this doesn't happen often enough is a lot of salespeople, unless they were part of the deal that they want to talk about as a customer story, don't have a good way to talk about it as a story, right? They're only comfortable maybe name dropping, but not really diving into a story. But yeah, the increase in win rates here isn't surprising because trust is definitely a big part, when it comes to a buying decision.
Yeah. Do you, I guess my personal reason, maybe other people can share this with me. My personal resistance would be like not wanting to share another company's struggles. Like this is where they were struggling with this, and this, and then we help them do X, Y, Z. How do other people approach that? Do they get the client's permission to share? Like what do you think people are doing in that regard?
So of course, I mean, like a majority of this data is based off tech companies, right? In which case we know that pretty much all of them publish a list of logos on their website, right? So they definitely have at least a few customers who are willing to lend them their name and that they can use for building credibility. I can understand, like in a services kind of scenario, you might have confidentiality clauses that don't allow you to mention maybe some of the biggest customers by name. But yeah, I don't think that, at least in this data set, that is as significant a problem.
Okay, cool. All right, let's go. What other gems we have? This is awesome. Are you guys enjoying this? Let us know.
Okay. So what we did here was we split it out into like low talk to listen ratio, moderate talk to listen ratio, and high talk to listen ratio. And we said, is there a difference in win rates across these three things? And ta-da, no difference. All right, like the win rates literally remain the same. Yeah, I know this is a controversial one.
That's it is shocking. I tend to talk a lot, so it's a little comforting.
Yeah. And yeah, I think if anybody here is curious about finding out their own talk to listen ratios, etc., do sign up for the trial at the end of the webinar. You'll be able to get some of your own data and see whether that surprises you.
I have to force myself to go with this during calls because I always have a tendency to want to jump in, but I'm always restraining myself, But that's more like don't interrupt the customer. That's like cardinal sin, right? Never ever interrupt. But yeah, it can be really difficult for extroverts. I'm a former introvert turned extrovert. Now shut up. All right, go ahead.
I wouldn't have guessed. Yeah, I think, I'll skip through some of these. I know we're kind of running close on the hour as well. So, the other one is always be closing, basically asking questions around like, who's going to sign the contract? What does the process here look like, etc. This happens definitely much more often than some of the other things that we saw. And yeah, it does help with win rates. So kudos, salespeople. Keep doing what you're doing.
Some of the traditional stuff really works, huh?
Yeah, not all the best practices are bad.
Well, I think there was, there's that running stat that what was yours? Can you go back a couple slides? How many? Go one more. 21. Yeah. This is like, 90 something % of salespeople don't ask a closing question. Like they don't even at the end try to close the deal. But always be closing is like trial closes and just keep getting them to make little commitments along the way instead of just like spewing out a bunch of stuff and then, waiting till the end to see if they're interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So this is not exactly a best practice. It's peaked its way in just because everybody encounters competitors. And I think a lot of times, reps kind of assume that if a competitor gets mentioned, they're very likely to lose the deal. But, the thing is, today it's a pretty competitive world. You are probably going to encounter a competitor. It's probably good to encounter a competitor because that means the prospect is serious. They're evaluating a bunch of tools. They're not just like, sitting on the fence saying, should I buy something in this particular space?
Right.
So yeah.
And it's also, I get this with like cold calling sometimes, which is don't mention competitors, but at some point, if they're serious about buying, they're going to look at other options. So you kind of want to be be proactive in that regard and do the shopping for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I think we just wanted to look at customer objections overall, another one that people usually get scared by. But the good thing is actually the win rates increase when customers talk about objections. My hypothesis on this one is that if a customer is talking about objections, it does two things. One is it means they trust you enough. You've earned the right for them to at least tell you, what they're thinking. And the second is that, if they mention an objection, that means you have a way to at least address that concern. If they just walk out of the room just thinking of the objection, then, you don't even have a way to put in your pitch.
Nice. So objections are opportunities. It's true.
Yeah.
They say.
And I think, I think it comes in the same category as like, the pre-closing.
Yeah. Instead of trying to avoid objections at all costs, welcome them as an opportunity to get past that. Because what happens is if they don't have any objections, they get off the call. If they don't have any objections, they usually don't buy because they usually need to have some kind of question or objection in order to actually make it, a definitive decision. And if they don't tell you on the call, then they're going to think about it after the call, and you're not going to be there to actually help them overcome it. So then that's where people start to just ghost you and just start disappearing because they have objections that you didn't get to address.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the one place where sales reps seem to be doing a good job is, trying to talk about next steps. At least in our data, we saw literally every call had, some sort of a discussion around next steps, or at least a question around next steps. Not every call ends with committed next steps, but at least, it's being brought up. I think that's an encouraging sign. I think managers don't need to chase the reps as hard about that one. Yeah. And of course, I mean, in this case, because it was literally all of the calls, you don't really see much of an impact, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end. Over to you, Jessica.
So we're gonna open up for Q&A, but I also want to before we jump into that, I want to offer everybody a complimentary sales blueprint call with me, where we'll map out step-by-step a sales blueprint for 2021 for your unique business on how to convert leads to sales. So we'll take what you heard today and show you how to implement it in your own business. You can sign up for that at jpmconsult.youcanbook.me. Oh, there's 2 O's in there, not 3. I mistyped that. What we'll do is we'll figure out what's working, what's not working in your business. We'll map out a plan for you. And then you can either take the blueprint and apply it on your own, or you can ask me how we can work together to help you implement that for 2021 with one of my new programs that I'm launching. And they're all focused on developing the it factor in sales. So if you ever wonder, like, how come some people are just so easy for them, or having a problem coaching salespeople to develop some of the things that made sales easy for you, this is what that's all about. So I have like 1-day program where you can jump in and learn sales if you're someone who needs to learn how to sell, and then 6-week coaching programs attached to it. And I'll tell you all the details on there. But basically, this is what's got people over $100 million in results working with me. And so I'm excited to share it in this new group program. Since it is a new program, there's a massive discount. There'll be a 50% discount for people who join me in the first round. So get on that if you want that. Again, I'll only share the details with you if you want to learn about it after your blueprint call. And again, if you just want to take that blueprint and apply it, I'm happy to have given you that time and share that knowledge with you. It's for founders who need to sell, specifically tech, SaaS coaches and consultants. And it's for also their sales teams and their sales managers. I also focus on purpose-driven companies. So if your goal is just to make money and not make an impact, then we're probably not a good fit. But if you're a purpose-driven company who wants to make an impact, increase your impact, influence, and income, then we might be a good fit. So jump on a call with me. And next we have a free, this is from Shruti. She's giving you a free trial with Wingman. I'll let you explain what you guys do there at Wingman so you can actually take this bot and apply it to your own teams to see how they're really doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Wingman basically jumps on every sales call and audits it, analyzes it for you. What that does for you is it gives you a bunch of aggregate stats that help you understand why are deals closing, why are some of my reps doing so much better than the others, are people really applying the playbooks that I've laid out, are my playbooks working, some of those questions, and literally setting up the tool, while it does so much, is a less than 5-minute job. You go in, you can sign up. It syncs seamlessly with the different things that you might be using, like your CRM, your video conferencing tools. If you're using a dialer, then the dialer as well. And it brings all of that intelligence from the calls, from the emails, from the CRM into one place where you can understand what's working, what's not.
Exciting. And so I'm going to be emailing these all to you guys too. So don't worry, but we did try to make the links really easy to remember. And then the third thing is the next slide, which I promised you if you stayed to the end, that you'd get the notes on all of this in a really nice, simple PDF that you can share with your team or whoever and take back the notes. That's at jess.tips/WG notes. I'll put that in the chat too. And I'd love to open up for questions. If anyone has questions, you can unmute yourself. You can raise your hand if you can figure out how to do that in the chat. But go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, and we're here to answer them for you. All right. No questions? All right, cool. All right, we are going to close this out with the commercial again, so you guys can hear it one more time. And this is a little ditty that I wrote for Shruti as a thank you for coming on today. And thank you everybody for joining us and interacting, and hope to see you soon in one of our, on a call or in a trial or something like that. Bye.
Meet my sales bot. She's so hot. She analyzes data like a real big shot. She's got 5 shocking lessons that everyone should do to double your sales by 2022. 2022.